Philippians chapter number 4. And by way of review, overcoming anxiety and fear. And this is not how the world prescribes us to do it. We've talked about understanding the nature of our emotions, understanding the source of our fear, reviewing the path from unbelief to anxious thoughts. And it all goes back to a distrust in God. And when we exhibit unbelief, we question the character of God, and we take upon ourselves anxious and fearful thoughts. Mishandling anxiety with controlling behaviors. We talked about controlling behaviors for 2 weeks. And then last week we started on the biblical solution to anxiety. And number one we said was guarding our heart. Now, if you don't have last week's, would you raise your hand? Who has last week's? Is anybody? These folks. Brother Hubbard, which one do you have? Do you have the new one? Okay, right down here to my left, all right? And he'll get you those. And guard our heart. And unbelief and discontent, we said last week, are the seedbed of anxiety. Unbelief and discontent are the source and seedbed of anxiety. If you trace anxiety in your life, when you get to the bottom, you'll find discontent or unbelief. It's a discontentment with where you are, where God's put you, what God's given you, or an unbelief in the character of God, that He knows what He's doing, and it's His nature to love us and to take care of us. We're distrusting His character, and we talked about that. In letter A, we see we need to pray right. Prayer is a reality check. Prayer is a surrender check, of course. And then I gave you several things under that. And number 2 was prayer is a surrender check. And I just don't want to take the time to go back through all of that. But they'll be on our website. The handouts should be on our website. And then we talked about, am I willing to come to God for His glory and not just for my relief? A lot of times we want help, we want deliverance from the circumstances, but God doesn't always take you out of circumstances, especially if they're humanly created. If they're because of your own choices, God's not necessarily going to snatch you out of them. Now, He has promised His presence in the midst of those circumstances, but He doesn't always deliver you from circumstances. The only thing that you have a guaranteed way out every single time is temptation. He said, I will. Not I might. I will make a way of escape. There's always a door. When there's temptation facing you, don't say the devil made me do it. Don't say I had no other choice. God always gives a way out. Always. Now, He may not deliver you from your circumstances, the things that He's using to conform you to His image. Now, those things are for your good, and He's not just going to snatch them away. He's doing something. He's working with something. But the sin, the temptation, the solicitation to sin, to do evil, God doesn't tempt any man to do evil, but He does give you a way of escape. He'll give you a way out. And lastly, we said, do I come away from prayer, talking about praying right, with peace, that God in His love, sovereignty, and wisdom will do what is best, and God will do what is best. Not only pray right, number 2 we come to tonight, think right. Think right. Now, we must identify your enemy thoughts of anxiety. Identify your enemy thoughts of anxiety. We've got to know, it's like the boxer who says, he goes to his corner, and the trainer says, man, he ain't laid a glove on you. Get out there. Go get him, champ. He goes out there and gets his nose half broke, pulled around his face. He goes back to the corner. Hey, he ain't touched you, man. Go out there and get him. Puts Vaseline all over his eyes. You go out there and get him, champ. He ain't put a glove on you. His nose is halfway across his face. He goes back out there again, gets knocked just plumb staggering around. He goes back to the corner. Hey, he barely even touched you. He said, well, listen, I don't know who is whooping me, but there's somebody out there beating my head in. So I want you to find out who it is. You might need some glasses, you know. And we get knocked around, and we wonder, you know, and we don't even try to identify where it's coming from. And the world, the flesh, and the devil are three areas of attack in our life. But these thoughts will, and by the way, once you know, anything that comes into your mind it's there. There's really no purging it. Now there's a forgiveness for it. And Jesus Christ, in Him, we can be overcomers in what's in our mind. We can renew our mind. But just like a computer, you dig around long enough, it's going to be there. And we've got to identify these enemy thoughts that are creating this anxiety. Again, I say to you, we live in a culture that says anxiety is like the pneumonia. It's a cloud that comes on you. That's a lie straight out of hell. That's a lie. Anxiety is not something that just floats out of the sky and attacks you. I mean, it comes. Now, again, some folks, their physical makeup are more prone to certain things than others. I understand all of that. But I'm telling you, at the bottom of it is discontent and unbelief. And these enemy thoughts, we've got to identify them. And it's like the cowboy that was up on the ledge. And they said, you watch out. The Indians are coming. You watch them now. And so he sees this way off. It's a little old bitty stature in his eyes from the cliff down, way down the valley to where the Indian was. It just looked like a little old fella. See anything? No. He keeps coming. And he gets bigger and bigger, and finally they get overtaken by the Indians. And the captain said, hey, I thought I told you to watch out for these Indians. He said, why didn't you shoot them? He said, sir, he said, I couldn't shoot him. He said, I've been knowing him since he was that high. We do that with things and thoughts, primarily thoughts, that we allow to linger and linger. And sometimes we even know where they're coming from. We refuse to deal with them. Think right. You got to identify these enemy thoughts of anxiety. The word anxious or careful in our Bible comes from a Greek word meaning to divide. And certainly if Satan rather wants to divide, he wants to destroy you, what's the best way to do it? He divides your mind. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So he's not going to go. He's going to go for your mind. He's going to divide your loyalty, divide your allegiance to Christ. How does he do it? He does it in your mind. So the word here, anxious or careful in our Bible, comes from a Greek word meaning divide. A sinful care or worry is something that divides your heart and places your attention on yourself rather than on God and what He said. When we let those anxious thoughts just live and breathe and grow in our mind, it drives out the knowledge and the communion we have with Jesus Christ. I mean, we're driving out His presence with these anxious enemy thoughts, these fearful and anxious thoughts. We're letting them consume us, whatever it may be. It may be about finances, about a relationship, about an insecurity of some kind. Whatever it is, we just let them just drive the presence of Christ out of our mind. We got to be careful. It's a battle every single day. So identify these thoughts of sinful care or worry. It divides your heart and places your attention on you rather than on God. You can't shoot an enemy you don't see. What does your anxious thoughts look like? Here's some practical steps to find out. And, you know, we talked about way back many weeks, the if-only thoughts and the what-if thoughts. And we can all think of 3 or 4 what-if thoughts, if-only thoughts that consistently barge into our minds. We can all think of them, but you know there's more than 3 or 4. There's more than 3 or 4. And that what if and if only, what does it do? It breeds discontent and distrust. If only God, you took care of me like so-and-so is being taken care of. If only God, we had this like so-and-so has her. What if I was not born to this family? What if I was born to that family? What if I was raised in this environment instead of this environment? And boy, you play that stuff long enough and loud enough, and it continuously just eats at you and eats at you. We've got to put a stop to these thoughts, and the only way to do it is to identify. So, write them down. Keep a running list. Again, don't just pretend like it's not there. We let these anxious thoughts absorb our mind, and then we go to the doctor and we say, zonk us out because I don't like the thoughts I'm having. Because it's too hard to try to identify them and say, this is where it's coming from. And so we just go get some mind-numbing stuff and just say, I'd rather take something that would just knock me out and make me like a zombie than I had rather deal with what's really troubling my mind. So and it's not easy. It's easier to take a pill. It's easier to get hooked up to an IV. It's not easy identifying thoughts that are troubling. We don't want to do it. Because it brings discomfort, brings irritability in our soul. We don't like to think about them. But we've got to address the what if thoughts, the if only thoughts, these troubling thoughts that create anxiety in our heart and our mind. We've got to identify what they are. And the only way to do that, write them down. I would add them. I'd put them on a list and then add to that list reoccurring thoughts of doubt and uncertainties. When you're doubting things, when you're uncertain, write those down too, because those things are coming right on the heels of those others. And then you're going to be overtaken by it. And, you're scaring yourself with your thoughts. Your thoughts. It's like, like the monster. What are the monsters under your bed? What do they look like? Well, you got to identify. You got to figure out. And by the way, this is not just for somebody this is for all of us. There are things that I think before, if I eat impulsively, I'm being transparent here, and some of you I wouldn't. Well, I am. Sometimes I eat impulsively, and before you judge the pastor, there are things you do impulsively too. But I know what faults, and it's the church members' fault anyway to make me eat everything. I'm just teasing. But no kidding. When I get burdened down with the cares of the church, I got to examine, okay, why are you eating this? You're eating this to think about, to try to make things better by eating this trouble away. Or you want to sit here and think about it while you're eating. I know this is real stuff here. But so you impulsively sit there and do, or whatever it is, whatever habit, it may not be eating for you, it may be something else, but you're sitting there doing that, but it's so that you can try to handle what you're thinking about. And so I've tried to do it, and I do it now. I identify, okay, I'm not hungry, what is making me want to just impulsively, blindly do this? What is it? And then get down to this is it. And then get back to, hey, God, I don't need a burger to handle this because you got it under control. I don't need to do this in order to pacify me or I don't need that because you have this under control. You have it. And so what does it boil down to? Again, distrust or discontent. I don't trust that he's big enough to handle everything I've got to handle, so I try to do it myself the best way I can. Danger. Danger. He's big enough. We've been learning about the character of God, but think right. Think right. And so add to this list, and remember, you've got to identify. Number 2, not only think right, reject these enemy thoughts of anxiety. Reject these enemy thoughts of anxiety. Since God commands us to fear not, Isaiah 41:10, fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. And be careful for nothing. Philippians 4:6. But in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And it's entirely possible for us to obey that command with his help, though it may seem difficult at first. It may be difficult. We've got to, whatever the thoughts, before I got saved, and I listened to music I shouldn't listen to, and I'm sure we've all battled that. And for some of you it was Elvis, for some it was Eric Clapton. It differs. And so when I went off to Tennessee Temple, I hadn't been saved long. And you got to, and I didn't struggle a lot with this because God had already given me victory over it. But there were certain songs that I'd be sitting in the Old Testament survey class, and they'd come up. Now I know you don't look suspicious at me. You know that's right. And you can't remember 5 Bible verses, but buddy, when that thing comes on, every word, tune, all of it. When they did it, what year they did it, probably got the video memorized. And every bit of it. And you call them not flashbacks, they're fleshbacks. You're having a flashback now. But honestly, if you sit down on that stuff, hey, he's going to keep bringing it. He's going to keep, that's like somebody at a bar, a drunk at a bar. Hey, there's a reason they give them peanuts. They're not stupid. Hey, they're creating a thirst. And if you want to sit down on some rogue thought that's in your mind, Satan will give you everything in his power so that you can sit there and feel sorry for yourself and just run all over that thought and just get real nice and pitiful and everybody's bad and everybody's against me. I mean, he'll give you everything in his power to make you sit in there and stew on that. Or even an evil thought. But you've got to reject that. Hit the skip button. When number 2 comes on, if number 2's not right, skip number 2. I'm not just talking about songs, I'm talking about thoughts. Just keep keep skipping it and keep skipping it and keep filling it with better stuff. You've got to replace it. Same way with kids. You don't say no, and then take everything in the house. You got 4 walls and sheets. And then you sit on the couch and watch TV while they're sitting looking at the 4 walls. You replace what you took. If you take an hour of video games, and you ought to, then you better get up and do something. Get a ball bat, go to the batting cage, get a chainsaw, get a weed eater. Do something. Besides just what we're good at. No. The same way with your thought life. You can't just take it out and think that it's just going to be neutral now. You can't hit the skip button and just think that you're going to go naturally to Amazing Grace by Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver. You're going to have to work at rejecting those thoughts when they can identify them first. Know that this is what I'm thinking before I feel pitiful, before I feel lonely, before I feel left out in the cold, before I feel this way, before I feel like nobody cares. This is what's happening, and it's not from God. I know where it's from. I know who gave it to me. And this anxious thought, I can't go out in public, or I can't, somebody, if I do this is going to happen. Or if I go out, I'm going to catch something. All kinds of controlling behaviors can take place. But you've got to find out the source, figure out this is the thoughts that start coming when it gets that way. And I've got to reject them when they come. And if you continue to reject those thoughts and to replace them, God will help you. And God will give you peace and power. But a lot of times he's not going to give you peace and power to overcome until you first say no. He's going to give you more peace and more power. You say no, he'll do that. But if you just say yes and you let those thoughts come sit down in your lap and they come in your house, it's just going to be one big old pity party, one old woe is me party, gloom, despair, and agony on me. and you just invite it all in, just have one big old party. Or go back to where some things that you're involved in before, and if you want to entertain that, Satan will make sure he can give you every detail you ever wanted. Do you know what you got to do? Skip. Skip. Boy, if they really got, skip. Boy, I wonder what they're doing on Saturday night. Skip. You got to hit it. You got to reject it. You can't just sit still and be a punching bag for Satan. He'll wear you out. And he doesn't play fair. It's not a neutral thing. It's not just going to go away. We've got to reject it. Reject it. Hit the skip button and ask the Lord Jesus to help you, and he will. 2 Corinthians 10:3-5, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. What you'll find is, once you hit that skip button, it used to be every 5 seconds you was thinking something, or something was coming back. And then it'll be every 10 minutes. Then it'll be every 3 hours. Then it'll be every 3 or 4 days. Then it'll be years for some of that stuff. Now, there are other things that Satan will use. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying once you think right, and then once you reject these lies, identify them and reject them. You got to know what they are and then reject them. Once you do that, they'll get fewer and fewer and far between. They just will. And you say, boy, you act like you never struggled with any of that stuff. Oh, yeah, but God gave me the victory. Now, some people that don't hit the skip button, it's going to take a lot longer. You're going to keep on, and you're going to get back, relapse into those bad, anxious, fearful thoughts and be overcome with them. And you're going to go back to square one. You're going to go get that lollipop back out. You're going to get on that lollipop of all the stuff, and you're going to start back over. Let's not start back over. Let's reject those thoughts, ungodly thoughts, self-absorbing thoughts, selfish thoughts. We got to reject them and allow the Lord to help us. He said, the pulling down of strongholds, verse 5, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Now, I want you to do something. If you have a pen, I want you to do this on the back of your paper. If you got a pen, I want you to do this. On the back of your paper, I want you to write your first name with your right hand. Whatever hand you write with, write your first name on the back of the paper. Now I want you to take your left hand and do the same thing. How'd it feel? If you're right-handed, it felt quite uncomfortable. You know what's going to happen? When you start you start casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against God, you start it's not right. I didn't come from God. It's not right. You know what's going to happen? It's going to feel uncomfortable. I can't even remember tying my shoes this morning. It's natural. It's a habit. It's habitual. Same thing for bad habits as it is for good habits. And so, man, if you keep on casting down, yeah, it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel awkward for you to replace that thing that you've been so used to leaning on, that bad thought, that thought that's not glorifying to Jesus Christ. It's not going to, because you're so used to that. You're so used to leaning on that crutch of, it's my mama's fault, it's my daddy's fault, it's where I was from's fault. It was this, I hadn't had every opportunity that everybody else has had, and I've got the short end of the stick, and my husband's not like hers, and she's not like, and all this stuff. We start leaning, no. Casting down. That's active, that's engaged. That's not just watching Star Wars. We're actively engaged in casting down. And yes, it's awkward at first. I mean, if you hadn't read your Bible in a year, can I tell you it's not going to feel like the most spiritual thing you've ever done when you read it tomorrow? Why? Simple. You ain't done it. It's like writing your name with your left hand if you're right-handed. It didn't feel exactly. Hey, But you keep on practicing. You keep on doing it. We don't absorb all the bath water when we take a bath, but it's still good to take one. Same way with Bible. You may not absorb every chapter and every verse you read, but just it's the cleansing of the word. The washing. Hey, it's helpful. It's helpful. It's awkward. When you find that fault and you identify it, you reject it, it's going to be awkward when you fill it with something else. You're not used to that. But it's okay. God will give you the help you need. And these enemy thoughts, God will help you to reject them. And sometimes enemy thoughts seem intrusive. And it's like you cannot get them out of your mind. You might even feel almost if you're being attacked in your mind somehow. Understand these obsessive thoughts are the product of your repetition and concentration on the doubt or other evil thoughts. You think, boy, I can't get out from under this cloud, this obsession. You've been used to that so long. You've got to get out of it. Repetition. Repetition of what? Transformed by what? By the renewing of your mind. You've got to change what you're repeating. We all repeat stuff. We just got to repeat the right stuff. And concentrate. We all concentrate, but we got to concentrate on the right stuff. Our memories work quite predictably, and they do. If we review something over and over, our mind remembers it better. If we concentrate on something very diligently, our mind imprints it more deeply. And lastly, if the thing upon which we are concentrating elicits from us strong emotion, we're sure to remember it more vividly. And that means when you're trying to replace these evil, anxious, fearful thoughts. And by the way, they are evil, not healthy, not spiritual. But when you're trying to do that, you've got to make it a big deal. I mean, it's got to be a big deal. You've got to put some good thoughts into, and I mean, man, get in there and you say, well, I didn't get nothing. Read the Bible till you get something. And remember those good, momentous things. I mean, I'll never forget things, there's things in my mind that I'll never forget. I'll never forget. I got to spend time with some great preachers of old. I'll never forget walking into Harold Seitler's office when I was a teenager. And seeing him back there and sitting behind his desk with watery eyes on a Saturday afternoon, getting ready for Sunday. I'll never forget it. So when we're tempted to go sideways, that helps. Having something big, a big deal. And I remember that often. I remember conversations with Tom Williams and other great preachers and just riding and talking. And I remember things they said to me, talked to me about. And it's good to put a good habit with something that evokes good memories. Good memories. And I want you to get real quick. I just want to show it to you tonight. And if you look at the sheet that has the blanks under it, it's got the lines and the blanks under it. I didn't get halfway finished tonight, but I want you to take this home. It should be 9 on the paper. And I want you to look up 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And you go down through there. And we're talking about trusting God and knowing who He is, knowing His character. I want you to go down 1 Corinthians 13 and look at this. And number 1, it says, my Heavenly Father is patient and kind. This is things in 1 Corinthians 13 that the writer, Paul's telling us to do. And love is about love. Do you know God is love? And so when we go to Him, what do we say? We got to know who He is, right? We don't just come in the kitchen with our book bags from school. Remember that illustration? And just throw the book bags down and never know who Mama was. Stop a minute. It's okay to throw the book bags down, but get to know Mama. Same way with the Lord. You're gonna be able to lay the backpack down. That's why you're coming to Him. But stay around long enough to know his character and who he is, not just the fact that he's a backpack depot. He's a loving God who can be trusted, and we've got to know his character. And so these 9 things are just going down through 1 Corinthians 13 and saying the things about God that he says for us, or that love is. So I want you to go back and look through these and look them up this week. And I'm glad that God can give us deliverance from these thoughts. These anxious, fearful thoughts that grip our families. I deal with it every week of my life. There's not a week, bar none, that goes by that I don't deal with somebody with panic attacks, with anxiety. And preacher, do you look down on people? Absolutely not. You kidding? No way. Man, I love, we're in this thing together. And if everybody be honest, we've all been there. And but I'll tell you, this stuff's real, but it can be met with a biblical answer. Listen, doctors have their place, and I'm not anti-doctor, but I'm telling you, when it comes to the thoughts and hearts of men, there's only one answer. That's Jesus Christ. As Brother Daniel said, it's Jesus Christ. We've got to meet anxiety and fear with the Word of God. You've got to identify what thoughts are you having, and then reject them. Some of you need to practice this week. I tell you, so-and-so's wife, they don't do that. They don't spend all his money. Some of you men ought to say something right there. Well, I tell you, if I saw in his closet, he had every one of his shirts creased, could have cut somebody. I ain't had nothing ironed in years. I have. If you're not careful, you can just find them everywhere. And then anxious, and I know people, and they're not making light of it, but it turns into controlling behavior to where, and I feel so sorry for people that sometimes can't function in society. I'm not talking about brain injury and so forth. I'm talking about just stuff due to what we think. And it can only be beaten one way, and that's the Word of God. Got to identify it. We've got to reject it. Don't let it lay around. If you do, it'll take you over. It will.